Hello and welcome to the show. We call this Molotsky on Money. The show is all about, well, the clues are in the title. We'll be discussing money, specifically investment strategies, taxes, estate planning, insurance, and many other topics, all of it designed to help you and your family improve your overall financial picture. The Molotsky part of our title comes from our panel. Their name is Molotsky. Each week we'll have Stan Molotsky, president and founder of the SHM Financial Group, as well as Lee Molotsky, vice president of the SHM Financial Group. So stay tuned because we have valuable information on each show. Tonight is no exception that we hope everyone, you and your family, can benefit from. As we like to say, Stan, it is not an exception tonight. We have a lot of good information for everybody.
We hope so. Yes, we do.
Yeah, we're going to talk tonight about something that people probably, another thing that they don't understand, which is legacy planning. And I know you do a lot of things in your firm and you try to help people. And this show is about information and education. So we're trying to inform and educate tonight here on this show. Right. When you're talking about legacy planning, what exactly do you mean?
Well, a lot of times people accumulate money, and then we sit down with them and say, well, why are you accumulating this money? What is it for? Is it for you? Is it for your spouse? Is it for your children, grandchildren, charity? What is this money for? And that's part of the legacy planning. The money not only making sure that it's for you meaning the family, but then what happens to this block of money if something should happen to both you and your spouse? Where does it go? How does it get there? And what's the easiest and most productive way for that money to get to wherever it is you want it to go?
Is this something, Lee, that people kind of just assume happens and they either forget about it or they don't do anything about it?
Yeah, it kind of just evolves. People have, our approach is really to separate their assets into buckets, and it's really our bucket approach. Bucket one, money for now, today, the next 12 months. Bucket number two, monies that you can use in years 2, 3, 4, and then other monies that you're going to use in years 5 and on in your life. So sometimes there's a lot of money left over. Where do we fit that into the planning process? And those are monies that we utilize for legacy planning. They're going to be left to the beneficiaries or the heirs.
And the key with that is making sure that the beneficiary designations on all the different assets that they have are up to date and are going to where they wanted it to go to in a coordinated fashion.
A lot of times though people say, well, I don't need to do that. It's just going to go to my kids. The money's going to go to my kids or my wife, so she'll take care of everything, or my husband will take care of everything. Do people say that to you and they figure that's just going to happen?
They have said that in the past. We point out a multitude of different things why that may not necessarily be the case, and then we help them adjust it and put it in the proper form so that some of the things that have happened to some very famous people won't happen to them as far as where the assets go. I mean, we've had circumstances where we've looked at the different documents and our in-house attorney has looked at the different documents, and all of a sudden we say, oh, wait a second, this beneficiary on this old insurance policy, this is not the name of your current wife. What, oh my goodness, I never changed that. Those kinds of things happen more than people are aware of.
And Lee, when people do things like that, if they don't address it, and obviously that's what you help them do, that's part of your service, that you help them look at everything. So if they don't do something about that, it could be a mess later on, correct?
It's a disaster. It's literally an unmitigated disaster. Sometimes, as Dad said, the idea is to set up your game plan, and if you don't look over certain provisions of the game plan could really not work out as you wanted it to.
Right, we have something we want to show the folks, which is just a list of the documents that they need that are part of legacy planning, and this is just a basic list. And you want to talk about this, Lee? These are what we call common legacy planning documents. Is this everything that people need when it comes to legacy planning?
No, but it's a good beginning. So you want to have a current will, needless to say. The will should be current, not 15, 20, 30 years old. You want to have a durable power of attorney. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You want to have a healthcare directive, And you want to literally lay out in a simple format your letters of instruction as to what your wishes are. Not on a napkin, but literally in front of a lot of groups that we deal with, legal professionals that, needless to say, we do not prepare these documents, but these are things that need to be addressed. Many times, often the attorneys that we deal with will videotape the process of it.
Exactly, so that
there's
there's no-
no
right,
there's
okay.
no discrepancy, as we'll talk about later tonight.
All right. Stan, letters of instruction, by the way, when my father passed away, he wrote his will on a napkin.
Well,
And it's interesting you
yeah.
mentioned that, but I was an only child and it was just my mother, so there was no issues,
Right.
but it was on a napkin.
Yeah.
Is that something, I mean, Lee was making a joke out of it, but is that a legal document?
That's a good question. It can be and it can't be. It depends on, how it's drafted, who it's drafted by. But suppose there were, 3 other siblings and their spouses all in contention for that, $20 million estate that, your father left.
Well,
which
it wasn't quite that. It was a little less than that.
Right. That's what happens when one grows up in South Philly, right?
Right, exactly.
No, but that's part of looking at and being aware of and making sure it's going to get to where you want it to get to. It's a different world today. We make available to, if I can make available to anybody who calls in from this show, an estate planning workbook that just basically allows them to list all the different things, who to get in touch with, phone numbers and different things to keep up to date, to pass on to whoever it is that's going to be the executor of that estate.
Right. Lee developed something which I thought was probably one of the best pieces of literature you ever developed in terms of this topic. And I remember you showed me, this was a couple of years ago, so we wanted to pass some of those along, and we're going to show one right now if we can do that. This is Estate Planning Failures, and this is of the rich and famous Marilyn Monroe. Now, Lee, you want to walk us through this here and explain what Marilyn's mistake is? Of course, everyone knows she's famous and they know the story. She passed away at the age of 36. But what was the mistake here, Lee?
I mean, obviously, if you read the bottom of the estate planning mistake, she left much of her estate to her acting coach. Not a bad idea. The estate was not huge, about $800,000, but Lee Strasberg claimed a right to her image. That left at least a $30 million payout for a woman. From a woman that.
Well, she didn't know,
Yeah.
Marilyn didn't know the woman who Lee Strasberg married, which was the third wife.
Correct.
So
So
Lee's
Lee's
the
third
third-
wife ended
Lee's
up
the
with
third
all,
wife.
with all of Marilyn's.
Right. Got the benefit of the image, which was worth about $30 million. So the third wife, who never met Marilyn, got $30 million out of this. So I'm sure that Marilyn would have wanted someone.
You don't think that was her objective?
I don't think so. No, leave it to somebody you don't know. So that's a mistake because she just didn't do anything about it. I mean, or she didn't plan
Correct.
more properly.
Well, the
Correct.
problem, when you're 32, 35, 36, you're young.
Right.
You don't think anything is ever going to happen to you, especially someone as famous and attractive as she was. So therefore, she just quite never got around to doing any kind of planning per se because she was in the moment. And there's nothing wrong with being in the moment, but you have to have some kind of planning process and say, okay, if something happens, where does this money go and what's the best way to do it? And the time to do it is almost immediately. You should start doing it and then gradually update it and change it.
All right, we have more to talk about here on the show. We're discussing legacy planning tonight. What is it? Do you need it? How can it help you as far as your overall financial picture is concerned? And we have plenty more to talk about here on the show. It is Molotsky on Money with Stan and Lee Molotsky. I'm your host, John DeMasi. We're coming back with more of this version of Molotsky on Money. We'll do that right after these words. Don't go away.
As you approach the day you retire, you approach the retirement cliff. For nearly every American, Social Security is a big part of your bridge over the cliff and into retirement. When you have a personalized Social Security maximization report, you will hold in your hands a blueprint for the bridge to carry you safely over the retirement cliff. You will know exactly what to do and exactly when to do it. Social Security Maximization Report. Maximize your Social Security income and minimize the dangers of the retirement cliff.
Call us to discuss the reverse mortgage concept. If you should decide to proceed, you're required to go through a 60-minute phone or office interview. We will provide you with a list of HUD counselors you can call who will provide you with the counseling. Call us at 1-855-HUD-REVERSE. That's 1-855-483-7383.
Welcome back to Molotsky on Money. I'm your host, John DeMasi, with Stan and Lee Molotsky. Remember, we're here every week at this time discussing a variety of issues, all of it financial in nature. And tonight, we're discussing legacy planning. What is it? How does it fit into your and your family's overall financial picture? And certainly, we have a lot more to talk about here on the show. Right before the break, Lee, we were discussing that issue of Marilyn Monroe and leaving money, and eventually a person she never knew got $30 million out of it. Now, what should she have done in order to avoid that?
A little difficult for a 36-year-old to sit down, a single woman, right?
Yes, she was 36.
36,
yes.
single. A little difficult to sit down a 36-year-old in the middle of her crazy career and try and talk to her about estate planning.
Yeah.
However, when you start to accumulate certain assets, you really want to just make sure they go to whom you want them to go to, and you should really have a current will. So without a current will, some things will happen unnecessarily. Even with a current will, some certain things may happen that you really may not want to happen. And so at $30 million, you really need to sit down with a well-seasoned estate planning attorney. A will is a basic item. Powers of attorney are really important, and that has nothing to do with her, but you really want to sit down with a seasoned legal professional. What we bring to the table is really, as part of the financial planning package, what we do is we review some of those documents, whether they're up to date or not, whether the provisions in them are correct, whether the beneficiaries are right, et cetera. And then we will suggest you modify them based upon what your goals and objectives are. But it's part of our process, encompasses those 4 items.
Stan, I wanted to ask you, we listed the documents, but a lot of people say, well, you know, I don't need to go to an attorney. I'll go into one of those office supply stores and they have these kits, wills and powers of attorney. Is that something people should do, or should they always go to an attorney?
Well, I think it's advisable to go to an attorney just to make sure that everything is officially done the right way. And not only, do you need the necessary will, you need the powers of attorney. Not only do you need the health powers of attorney, but you also need a financial power of attorney. You may have an IRA, a 401k, or 403b plan in your name, but if something happens, you become incapacitated. Without the financial power of attorney, nobody can act for you in relation to those particular assets. So when you sit down with an attorney, they point those things out. Like we said before, Lee, we are not attorneys, Lee and I. Our job is to look at what you have, work with our in-house attorney, who in turn then works with the person's individual attorney. They don't have it, we give you a list of 12 different ones in the particular area that you are, that we have worked with, that make a certain amount of sense for you to utilize, to draft it and do it in the proper way. And the cost of that is so insignificant in relation to the problems that you're going to solve later on for your heirs.
We've had attorneys on our radio show, and they've all said categorically, we don't really make money on preparing
Drafting.
the will or the,
Right.
or the power of attorney. We make money when there's mistakes and there's problems caused by the lack of a proper will or power of attorney.
Great point. That is a great point.
Right.
And that's true.
Right, and we have more of these examples to show you here. These are some famous people. One of my favorite entertainers of all time, Sammy Davis Jr., and when he passed away, which I believe was in 1990, his estate was a mess, Lee.
It was a bit of a mess.
Yes. I mean, and he left, Sammy was married at the time, left the wife with another mess. Talk about this, Lee, and what happened here.
I love Sammy Davis Jr. as well. Great entertainer. However, he had a little bit of a tax issue. Long story short, he owed about $7 million in taxes, I guess, to the Internal Revenue. He only had $5 million of an estate, and long story short, his widow, Altavis Davis, had to sell many of his belongings just to...
And still didn't make up the money.
No.
For what we understand, and then she passed away a few years later.
And then she got involved in a lawsuit with 2 former business partners of his, and
so that was the mess that we were talking
Right.
about, that where the attorneys probably made money because it was
and
a
now
mess caused
Sammy
by...
Davis's
Right.
case, that would have, he didn't have any life insurance. So part of a simple solution is to have some life insurance to deal with the taxes of the estate that
So
You
that
have.
if he would have had the life insurance, and certainly he made enough money in his lifetime to afford that, he would have, that life insurance would have paid the
would
taxes
have, well,
late or
it would
paid
have
something.
provided
Right.
provided his wife
heirs.
with some liquidity. If he had another $3 or $4 million worth of life insurance, it would have given it to her to help offset the tax liability that she faced.
And most people should consider modifying or adjusting or having that as part of their total estate planning. Show you how long I've been around. I watched Sammy Davis Jr. at the old Stanley Theater in Camden in the backstage, because one of my friends' father used to manage that theater when he was part of the Will Masterson Trio.
Well, that's
Wow.
going back.
And he was just a kid, and
Yeah.
I remember seeing that.
Can you give us an approximate year?
Well,
In
I
the-
could probably tell you.
If he was a kid
in the 1950s.
in the 50s.
Okay, speaking of the 50s, we have another one who skyrocketed to fame in the 50s, Elvis Presley. This is probably one of the most glaring estate planning mistakes, Lee. Elvis never did, and I read a few of his biographies, and I remember when he passed away and everyone was talking about him. He did virtually no planning.
No,
correct?
he had a $10 million estate, a nice size estate. Today would it be probably 100 to 200 million, who knows how much. About 73% of his estate was lost in the probate process between estate taxes and other settlement costs. There's a perfect example of a gentleman who could have used a trust to protect the assets, and his heirs today could be significantly better than they are today.
Well, his daughter's doing okay.
yeah, they
Yeah,
are.
but
I
I'm
mean,
saying,
But it could have been, in other words, money was lost.
Well,
that
there was a
right.
73% shrinkage in his 73%. So $10 million was how much he had when he passed. His beneficiaries received 2.7 million. That's 73%.
Yeah, but most of the value of that estate was in the aftermath.
Exactly.
After
Yeah,
effect.
he was worth more
the
when he
residual
died than he was
benefits.
alive. But,
Exactly.
But when he passed away, and Lee's point, obviously, is that they could have done more. So he should have done a trust. Is that what he should have done, or someone should have done it for him?
Part of the missing link in his particular case was the use of a trust that would have been able to continue it would have significantly eliminated the estate taxes from
What's
his
also
estate.
the frightening part about that, and the Marilyn Monroe example, and even the Sammy Davis Jr. example, I mean, these are highly successful performers. They have business managers, they have advisors, and still that stuff never quite got accomplished. So coming back, what the individual person is the one that's responsible to keep the
Absolutely,
things going.
yes.
So you can't rely totally on these outside entities.
Which they all did.
Unfortunately.
Which they all did.
Yes.
And I read where, in Elvis's case, his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, never believed in any kind of planning. At the end of the year, said, well, you made this, well, that's what you're going to pay in taxes. And they cut a check to the IRS every year,
Yeah.
which makes no sense. And today, no one would do that today, but
Hopefully.
that's the way it was.
Right.
We're going to get to a couple more in our next segment. In fact, we have more famous people that we're going to show you some, really people that you never would think would make these kind of mistakes, but did. But I also wanted to ask you, Stan, about another part of legacy planning, and this is part of what we're talking about, is asset protection. That is another phase, correct, of what this legacy planning is.
Right, exactly. And like Lee mentioned in the beginning, when we sit down with a client, it's a matter of saying, okay, this is what you need for now. This is what you need in 2 to 3, 4 years from now. And this is what you may need 5 to 10 years going out, and put it into different buckets, so to speak. And then at the same time, okay, if something happens to you and your wife, or vice versa, where does this money go? Where do you want this money to be deposited afterwards? And then make sure all the documents are doing what they're supposed to do in order to get it to where it has to go.
So you need planning, and you need asset protection, and you need the wills, the powers of attorney, all of those things as well. correct?
Absolutely. And our job is to help the client coordinate it.
Make sure they have it.
I mean, our job mainly is the financial aspect of the particular client that we're working with. At the same time, part of the planning process is to have everything in order so it can get to where it has to go with the easiest and quickest way possible, and in avoiding as much taxation as possible.
All right, we have plenty more to talk about here on the show. It's Molotsky on Money. We're discussing legacy planning on our program. And we have, as I said, a lot more to talk about. We'll show you some more of those famous examples of the rich and famous who didn't exactly do what they should have done when it comes to legacy planning. With Stan and Lee Molotsky, I'm your host, John DeMasi. We're coming back. More of this version of Molotsky on Money. We'll do that right after these words. Don't go away.
Balancing safety and risk in your portfolio is very important. An easy way to do this is to use the rule of 100. The closer you get to retirement, the less time you have to recover from losses. Not adjusting your risk as you age can have a traumatic effect on your retirement. This system will provide you with the percent of your nest egg that should be allocated to either safe or volatile investments. Do you know how to classify your assets? Do you know if they fit your risk tolerance? Give our office a call today for a complimentary Rule of 100 report.
Call us to discuss the reverse mortgage concept. If you should decide to proceed, you're required to go through a 60-minute phone or office interview. We will provide you with a list of HUD counselors you can call who will provide you with the counseling. Call us at 1-855-HUD-REVERSE. That's 1-855-483-7383.
Welcome back to Molotsky on Money. I'm your host, John DeMasi, with Stan and Lee Molotsky. We are here every week at this time, and we discuss a variety of financial issues. Tonight is no exception. We're talking about legacy planning, the various aspects of it, why it's important, and why you should make sure that you have it. Lee, I suppose everyone right now, after watching this show, should check and see if they've got the will and the power of attorney and the healthcare directive.
And who the beneficiaries are on their life insurance, their IRA accounts, their SEP accounts, their 401k, their 403b account. That is so important.
You know, it's interesting. We've worked together for 30 years, and we do a weekly radio show. We talk about this stuff every week. And when my mother passed away a couple years ago, I didn't look at anything. And I get a notice in the mail of my IRA, and she was still listed as the beneficiary.
There you go.
Which was a year later.
Right.
But they sent me a notice, so of course I changed it right away. But that's just one example.
Sure.
I mean, imagine if you had multiple things and multiple people.
And if you had a spouse or a second spouse or a
Exactly.
third spouse and 3 children who have gone on
And
to
stepchildren and all
Right.
these
Yeah,
kinds of
so
things.
a lot of moving parts. What we're
Right.
really just trying to focus down in on is kind of take stock of your inventory and do some inventory planning. Part of the process is bringing all your documents to the table. We'll take a look at them, have our in-house attorney look at them, and just make sure they're current. That's all. Whether you do anything about it or not,
That's your-
really up to you.
Right. But
as
you
part of
point it
our-
out to the client.
Right.
That's the important
And
part. You point it out.
sometimes we'll get aha, oh my God, I never thought of that. I really should do ABC.
And then they do it, which is good.
At their own
You
pace.
did your job.
But
right,
at least
yeah.
we pointed out to them, to you, if you're watching, what some of the pitfalls are and some of the mistakes that could potentially be down the road if you don't address your issues today. That's
Okay, we have more of those examples of, I don't want to say lifestyles of the rich and famous, but these, yeah, they are the rich and famous. Estate planning failures of the rich and famous. And this is one of the most famous, I guess, billionaires, Howard Hughes. And Lee, what was Mr. Hughes' mistake?
He didn't have a will. So long story short, about $2.5 billion estate. It took 7 years to settle his estate, spending the fortune among 22 cousins. And dozens of wills have surfaced. Dozens of wills have surfaced after his death, back in the mid-70s, I think it was. Laying claim to certain
There was a
assets.
movie. Wasn't there a movie made?
There was a
About the guy?
right, but
So-
he didn't have a will.
Didn't have a
Howard
will.
Hughes did not. Now you find that hard to believe, and that's why when you put this piece together, I thought it was great because people would say Howard Hughes must have had so many intricate financial things going on, and he didn't have a will, which really is
Beyond comprehension.
Beyond comprehension. Okay, we have some, as part of our show here, we have a couple of questions. We're going to start with this particular email question. And we try to pull these out from either our radio show or from seminars, and they're usually on topic, and tonight is no exception. This is George in Darby, Pennsylvania. My sister recently passed away, and I was wondering if there may be a problem with her estate. She recently married for a second time and had no children with her second husband. However, She had 2 children with her first husband, who predeceased her 10 years ago. Her second husband has children, and she left her second husband a sizable amount of money. I'm afraid her children may not receive anything. How can I find out what happens? This sounds like one of those complicated messes.
It's an episode on one of the television programs.
Right.
All in the Family, maybe?
One of them.
Right.
I mean, it's what will probably happen is her children from her first marriage, according to what she told us in that email.
Or what George told us about his sister, right?
Right. They'll get nothing. Because she left everything to the second husband, and then it's up to him to determine where that money goes. So it's possible
right.
he may not leave anything to the children of the first marriage.
Again, I'm sure that was not
The
needless
intent.
to say, that was not the intent, but that's the result of improper planning.
Right. Reading between the lines here, it seems to me as though his sister thought, well, my husband will take care of everything, the second husband, and he'll do right by my children. And we all know that when push comes to shove, your children versus somebody else's children, you know.
Well, it's like the Marilyn Monroe example, where she left everything to Lee Strasberg, who was her acting coach.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, he's married 3 times, and the third wife winds up with all of the assets, the residual assets of Marilyn Monroe's money, which is beyond comprehension to what Marilyn originally wanted. And I'm sure it's the same thing in this particular case. So.
We have, I believe we have time for one more question here, another email question, and this would be from, looks like Bill in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I recently had my will completed along with a power of attorney and a healthcare directive. My sister-in-law says my wife and I need more than that. Is that true? Everybody always has comments. Do you notice that?
System, I mean, more than what? I mean,
More than it looks like a power of attorney and a healthcare directive and a will.
Well, maybe a financial power of attorney would be helpful, just to coordinate everything if the power of attorney that did not accomplish that. But it seems like that is a basic start. I don't know how much more he could have in that particular problem. Tell the sister-in-law to stick to what she does. And,
She's probably not an attorney.
I would think not.
I mean, do you find that, Lee, that people come into you and say, well, my neighbor, my sister,
Never.
my cousin,
Never.
They
Yeah,
say that
sure.
all the time?
I heard, so,
yeah,
yeah.
I heard this as
Well, everybody has become an expert today.
Right.
I mean, because with all the things they can watch on television, especially our show, but makes them an expert. They can watch the internet, all these different things. So everybody becomes knowledgeable to a degree, but not the total degree.
Well, it's simple now. They can just watch us every
That's
week,
exactly
okay? They
perfect.
don't have to worry about
That is the
what's
solution.
on the internet, okay?
Right,
Because
exactly.
we're getting it from people who do it every day for a living. Bottom line here, you need the documents, the will, the power of attorney, the healthcare directive, the letters of instruction. You need that, Lee, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and you need to update that.
Well, that's the important thing.
They should be current.
Okay. They
And
be
you should
current.
look at
And
it.
a current, updated, continual beneficiary review.
That's so
is something
critical.
that really we bring to the table.
Right.
We will look at all your documents as well, but most importantly, we will ask you to make sure that the beneficiaries are properly designated within your asset picture.
And that will put the wraps on another edition of Molotsky on Money. Don't forget, we are here every week at this time, and if you would like to contact Lee or Stan Molotsky at the SHM Financial Group, the numbers have been up on the screen. Feel free to give them a call, email them, or go on their website. For Stan and Lee Molotsky, I'm your host, John DeMasi. Always a pleasure. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next time, right here, Molotsky on Money. Take care.
Do you know what your risk tolerance is when it comes to your investments? Do you know exactly what you have in your portfolio? The SHM Financial Group have developed a very important program called a financial stress test. It's simple, quick, and can help you in your future financial plans. Contact the SHM Financial Group to schedule it. Offices in Collingswood, Voorhees, and Lakehurst, New Jersey. Call 1-800-MONEY-SHM. That's 1-800-666-3974. Call us to discuss the reverse mortgage concept. If you should decide to proceed, you're required to go through a 60-minute phone or office interview. We will provide you with a list of HUD counselors you can call who will provide you with the counseling. Call us at 1-855-HUD-REVERSE. That's 1-855-483-7383.